Readiness is not a feeling, it is a decision rooted in remembrance of who you truly are. There comes a moment in every human life when something subtle yet unmistakable stirs beneath the noise of the world, a quiet inner movement that does not shout for attention but waits patiently to be noticed, like a steady light behind closed eyes. It is not dramatic, it is not urgent, and it does not arrive with instructions or guarantees. It arrives as a gentle knowing, a whisper of remembrance, a sense that who you have been pretending to be is not the whole truth of who you are. And in that moment, many people wait. They wait to feel ready. They wait for certainty. They wait for fear to disappear. They wait for the perfect alignment of circumstances, approval, validation, or confidence. But readiness, as you are now discovering, has never been a feeling. It has always been a decision. A decision rooted not in the future, not in outcomes, not in conditions, but in remembrance of your true nature. You were not brought into this world as a blank slate waiting to be filled with worth. You were not born lacking, incomplete, or in need of permission to exist fully. Long before you learned your name, long before you learned to measure yourself against others, long before you learned to doubt your intuition or question your inner voice, you arrived whole. You arrived as life expressing itself through a unique form, with a purpose that was not imposed from the outside but encoded within you. The forgetting came later. The confusion came later. The belief that you must earn your right to be here came later. And readiness, true readiness, is not about becoming something new. It is about remembering what has always been true. The ego, that well-intentioned but misguided construct, will tell you otherwise. It will tell you that you must be more prepared, more qualified, more healed, more confident before you take the next step. It will tell you that readiness looks like certainty, fearlessness, and total control. But the ego thrives on postponement. It survives by convincing you that your life is always about to begin, just not now. And so you wait. You wait until you feel ready, while life waits patiently for you to remember that readiness has never been about how you feel. It has always been about how you choose to see yourself. When you identify with the ego, you believe you are the sum of your past experiences, your mistakes, your regrets, and your labels. You believe your history defines your potential. You believe your wounds are proof of limitation rather than invitations to wisdom. But when you shift your awareness, when you step back and observe the ego rather than obey it, you begin to recognize something extraordinary. You are not the voice of doubt in your head. You are not the fear that tightens your chest. You are not the story of why it didn't work before. You are the awareness witnessing all of it, and that awareness is untouched, unbroken, and already ready. Readiness is not waiting for fear to disappear. It is choosing not to let fear make your decisions. Fear is not a sign that you are unprepared. It is a sign that you are standing at the edge of expansion. The ego interprets fear as danger because it equates the unknown with threat. The soul interprets fear as a doorway because it recognizes growth requires movement beyond familiarity. When you stop asking, "Why am I afraid?" and begin asking, "What is this fear inviting me to remember about my strength?" everything begins to change. You stop resisting the sensation and start listening to the message. And the message is always the same. You are more than you think you are. The universe does not wait for you to feel confident before it responds to your intention. It responds to alignment. Alignment is not emotional certainty. It is energetic congruence. It is the quiet, unwavering choice to act in accordance with your highest truth, even when your hands shake and your voice trembles. When you make a decision from remembrance rather than fear, you step into alignment with the intelligence that created you. And that intelligence does not question its own readiness. A tree does not wait to feel ready to grow. A river does not wait to feel confident before it flows. They move because movement is their nature. Expansion is your nature too. Much of what you have been taught about readiness is rooted in the belief that you are separate from life, that you must somehow prove yourself worthy of participation. But separation is the great illusion. You are not in life. You are life expressing itself through a particular lens. And life does not hesitate. Life does not second guess. Life does not postpone its own unfolding. When you remember this, readiness becomes less about preparation and more about permission. Permission to trust the intelligence within you. Permission to let go of the past as a reference point for what is possible. Permission to stop asking the world who you are and start listening to the answer that has always been arising from within. The past, when held unconsciously, becomes a prison. The ego uses memory as evidence, constantly replaying old experiences to justify why you should stay the same. But the past has no authority unless you grant it power. It exists as information, not identity. When you release the belief that your history determines your destiny, you reclaim your creative power in the present moment. And the present moment is the only place readiness exists. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Now. Now is where life is happening. Now is where decisions are made. Now is where remembrance becomes embodied. To live in the now does not mean denying your responsibilities or ignoring your plans. It means recognizing that your power to choose exists only here. When you bring your attention fully into this moment, you step out of the mental noise of comparison and expectation. You stop measuring yourself against imaginary timelines. You stop asking if you are behind. There is no behind in the present moment. There is only awareness, choice, and movement. And when your awareness is anchored in now, your decisions become clearer, calmer, and more aligned with truth. Healing, too, begins within, not because the world is unimportant, but because perception shapes experience. When you heal the way you see yourself, the way you see everything changes. You stop approaching life as something that happens to you and start participating as a conscious co-creator. You recognize that your inner state is not a reaction to external circumstances, but a reflection of your inner alignment. And from this place, readiness becomes natural. You are no longer trying to fix yourself before you act. You act from the understanding that you are already whole. There are no justified resentments, because resentment is a decision to carry pain forward in time. It is the ego's attempt to feel powerful by holding on to grievance. But forgiveness is not about excusing behavior or denying hurt. It is about freeing yourself from the energetic burden of the past. Forgiveness is the recognition that your peace is more valuable than your need to be right. And when you forgive, you reclaim energy that was trapped in resistance. That reclaimed energy becomes clarity. It becomes vitality. It becomes the fuel for decisive action rooted in self-respect rather than reactivity. You are already enough. This is not a motivational slogan. It is a metaphysical truth. Your worth is not conditional. It is inherent. When you believe otherwise, you live in a constant state of preparation, always becoming, never arriving. But arrival is not an event. It is a recognition. The recognition that you do not need to improve your essence, only your awareness of it. When you stop trying to become worthy and start acting from worthiness, readiness becomes obvious. Of course you are ready. You always have been. The soul always knows. It does not operate on timelines or logic. It communicates through resonance, through subtle impulses, through a sense of quiet rightness that does not need explanation. When you ignore the soul, it does not punish you. It waits, patiently, lovingly. But when you listen, even imperfectly, life responds with synchronicity. Doors open, support appears. Not because the universe suddenly decided you were ready, but because you finally decided to trust yourself. Change your thoughts, and you change your life, not because positive thinking manipulates reality, but because perception directs energy. Thoughts are lenses. When you shift from thoughts rooted in fear to thoughts rooted in truth, your actions naturally follow. You stop forcing outcomes and start allowing alignment. You stop striving and start flowing. This is not passivity. It is inspired action, action that feels grounded, purposeful, and sustainable. To release the ego is not to eliminate personality or ambition. It is to stop letting fear masquerade as wisdom. The ego says, wait until you feel ready. The soul says, remember who you are and move. One delays life, the other lives it. When you choose the soul's perspective, readiness ceases to be a question. It becomes a state of being, a quiet confidence that does not depend on applause, a steady commitment to authenticity over approval. You are a divine being having a human experience, not the other way around. Divinity does not need permission. It expresses. When you align with this truth, your life becomes less about proving and more about expressing. Expressing love, expressing creativity, expressing truth. And expression does not wait, it flows. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of a decision, wondering if you are ready, pause, not to analyze, but to remember. Remember that the part of you that doubts is not the part of you that decides. Remember that fear is a sensation, not a verdict. Remember that life is not asking you to be perfect, it is asking you to be present. Readiness is not something you acquire, it is something you acknowledge. Choose now, not because everything is clear, but because clarity follows commitment. Choose not from who you have been, but from who you are remembering yourself to be. And as you do, you will notice something remarkable. The path does not appear before you decide. It appears because you decide. And with each step taken in remembrance, life meets you, supports you, and reveals itself as the intelligent, loving, and responsive field it has always been. This is not about forcing change. It is about allowing truth to move through you. You are not late. You are not behind. You are right on time for the life that begins the moment you stop waiting to feel ready and start living as who you truly are. And as you continue to live from this place of remembrance, you begin to notice how subtly, yet profoundly, your relationship with life transforms. Situations that once felt heavy lose their grip. Conversations shift. Choices feel less dramatic and more natural. You are no longer negotiating with fear at every turn. You are observing it, thanking it for trying to protect you, and then choosing anyway. This is the quiet power of inner freedom. Not the absence of challenges, but the absence of identification with limitation. You see, most suffering does not come from what happens, but from the meaning we assign to what happens. The ego is a relentless narrator, constantly interpreting events through the lens of lack, danger, and separation. But when you remember who you truly are, you step out of the story and into awareness. You realize you are not bound by interpretations. You are free to choose a new perspective, and perspective is everything. Change how you see, and what you see changes. This is why readiness can never be postponed. Postponement assumes that something essential is missing, but nothing essential is missing. What is missing is not information, confidence, or skill. What is missing is trust. Trust in the intelligence that beats your heart without instruction. Trust in the wisdom that has guided you through every challenge you have already survived. Trust in the part of you that knows when something is complete and when it is time to move on, even if the mind protests. The mind wants guarantees. The soul wants alignment. Guarantees belong to a world of control. Alignment belongs to a world of flow. And life, at its deepest level, is not controlled, it is responded to. When you align with your highest intention, you do not need to know every step, you only need to take the next one. And the next one reveals the next, just as light appears beneath your feet when you walk in faith rather than fear. Faith, in this sense, is not belief in an external authority, it is confidence in the internal one. It is the knowing that you are supported not because life is predictable, but because you are connected. Connected to something vast, intelligent, and compassionate that does not judge your pace or question your worth. This connection is not earned through effort, it is recognized through stillness. When you slow down enough to listen, you hear it. When you quiet the noise of expectation, you feel it. And when you act from that place, life responds in ways that feel almost miraculous, though they are simply natural. You may notice that as you live this way, some people will not understand. They may call it reckless, premature, or unrealistic. But what they are really reacting to is your refusal to live by fear-based consensus. When you choose readiness as a decision rather than a feeling, you quietly give others permission to do the same. Your presence becomes an invitation, not a demand. And that is how true influence works. It does not convince, it demonstrates. There is a deep peace that comes when you stop arguing with yourself. When your thoughts, values, and actions begin to align, inner conflict dissolves. You no longer waste energy second-guessing every impulse. You learn to distinguish between intuition and impulse, between fear-driven urgency and soul-driven clarity. This discernment is not intellectual, it is experiential. It grows stronger each time you choose trust over hesitation. And hesitation, when examined closely, is often disguised self-doubt rooted in forgetting that you are not alone, forgetting that life has carried you through every uncertainty you once thought you couldn't handle, forgetting that growth has never required your permission to feel comfortable. It has only required your willingness to move. When you let go of the past as a defining force, you free yourself from repeating it. Memory becomes wisdom rather than weight. You honor what was without living there. You take the lessons and leave the limitations behind. This is not denial, it is evolution. And evolution is the natural impulse of life expressing itself through you. You may still experience moments of uncertainty. That is part of being human. But uncertainty no longer paralyzes you, it humbles you. It keeps you open, curious, receptive. You stop needing to be right and start wanting to be real. And in that authenticity, you find strength far greater than confidence, the strength of congruence. Congruence means your inner truth matches your outer life. It means you stop saying yes when your soul says no. It means you stop shrinking to fit spaces you've outgrown. It means you stop waiting for permission to honor your calling. And calling does not always announce itself loudly. Often, it speaks through quiet dissatisfaction, through a persistent sense that there is more, through a longing that refuses to be silenced. That longing is not a flaw, it is guidance. When you honor that guidance, even imperfectly, you align with your highest self. You become less reactive and more responsive, less driven by fear and more directed by purpose. And purpose, when lived, does not feel like pressure. It feels like relief. Relief from pretending. Relief from postponing. Relief from living half a life. You were not meant to live cautiously. You were meant to live consciously. Conscious living does not eliminate risk. It transforms it. Risk becomes exploration. Uncertainty becomes possibility. And readiness becomes an embodied truth rather than a mental debate. So allow yourself to step forward, not because you have everything figured out, but because you trust the part of you that has always known how to navigate the unknown. Allow yourself to act from remembrance, to choose from wholeness, to move from love rather than fear. This is the essence of inner freedom. And as you continue on this path, you will discover that the life you were waiting to be ready for has been waiting for you to remember who you are. Not someday, not when conditions improve, but now, in this breath, in this choice, in this quiet, powerful decision to live as the truth you have always been. And as this remembering deepens, you begin to sense a profound shift in the way time itself feels. Urgency softens. Regret loosens its grip. Anticipation becomes quieter, less anxious, more spacious. You are no longer racing toward a future version of yourself, nor are you dragging the weight of yesterday behind you. You are standing where life actually happens, and from this place, everything feels more honest, more alive, more real. You realize that much of what you once called procrastination was actually self-betrayal disguised as caution. It was the soul whispering now, while the ego argued for later. And later, you now see, was never about timing. It was about fear of expansion, fear of being seen, fear of stepping into a version of yourself that no longer fit the old stories. But stories only have power when they go unquestioned. Awareness dissolves them effortlessly. When you remember who you truly are, you stop asking life for permission to be authentic. You stop shrinking your truth to preserve comfort. You begin to understand that discomfort is not a sign you are on the wrong path. It is often a sign that you are shedding an outdated identity. Growth feels uncomfortable to the ego because the ego survives on familiarity. The soul, however, thrives on truth, and truth is expansive. You may notice that as you live from this place, your definitions of success and failure change. Success is no longer measured by external validation, but by inner alignment. Failure is no longer something to be avoided, but something to be listened to. You stop judging yourself harshly for missteps and start meeting yourself with curiosity and compassion. And compassion, especially toward yourself, is one of the most radical acts of remembrance there is. Self-compassion is not indulgence, it is wisdom. It recognizes that you cannot hate yourself into becoming whole. You cannot shame yourself into readiness. Wholeness emerges when you stop fighting who you are and start cooperating with who you are becoming. And cooperation with life feels very different from control. Control is tense, cooperation is fluid. Control resists what is. Cooperation listens to what is unfolding. As you listen more deeply, you begin to trust subtle impulses again. A nudge to speak, a pull to rest, an invitation to leave, an urge to begin. These impulses are not random. They are signals from a deeper intelligence that knows the terrain far better than the thinking mind ever could. The more you honor them, the clearer they become. The clearer they become, the less you need to analyze. Life begins to feel like a dialogue rather than a struggle. And this dialogue is always loving, even when it challenges you. Life does not challenge you to punish you. It challenges you to expand you. Every obstacle contains information. Every delay carries insight. Every ending makes space for something truer. When you stop resisting these movements and start trusting them, readiness becomes a lived experience rather than a theoretical concept. You may also find that forgiveness deepens in unexpected ways. Not just forgiveness of others, but forgiveness of yourself. Forgiveness for not knowing what you know now. Forgiveness for staying too long. Forgiveness for leaving too soon. Forgiveness for the times you doubted your worth or silenced your voice. This self-forgiveness is not about rewriting the past. It is about releasing your attachment to it. And release creates freedom. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is wanting what aligns with your truth. When desire is rooted in ego, it seeks fulfillment outside. When desire is rooted in soul, it seeks expression from within. And expression is always available now. You do not need to wait to be more healed, more enlightened, more certain. Healing happens through expression. Enlightenment unfolds through living. Certainty emerges through movement. You begin to see that readiness, at its core, is courage, married to trust. Courage to act without guarantees. Trust in the intelligence that moves through you. This is not blind faith. It is lived faith. Faith born of experience. Faith strengthened each time you take a step and discover that you are held. And you are held, always. Not in a way that prevents pain, but in a way that transforms it. Pain becomes teacher rather than enemy. Loss becomes opening rather than punishment. Change becomes invitation rather than threat. And through it all, a quiet confidence grows, not the loud confidence of the ego, but the steady confidence of the soul that knows it belongs. Belonging is not something you find in the world. It is something you remember within yourself. When you stop trying to earn belonging and start embodying it, you naturally attract environments, relationships, and opportunities that resonate with your truth. You no longer chase alignment, you become it. And life, always responsive, meets you there. So if there is something within you that has been waiting, gently, persistently, lovingly, hear it now. It is not asking you to be fearless. It is asking you to be honest. Honest about what no longer fits. Honest about what you long to express. Honest about who you are when you are not performing, proving, or protecting. This honesty is the doorway. Walk through it. Not because you feel ready, but because you remember. Remember that you are not broken. Remember that you are not behind. Remember that you are not here by accident. You are here to express a particular frequency of truth that only you can bring. And that expression does not require perfection. It requires presence. Presence is power. Presence is readiness. Presence is the meeting point between your humanity and your divinity. When you live from presence, you stop asking when your life will begin. You realize it has been unfolding all along, waiting for you to participate consciously. So choose now, again and again, if needed. Choose remembrance over rehearsal of fear. Choose alignment over approval. Choose to trust the quiet knowing over the loud doubts. This choice, simple and profound, is the turning point. Not a dramatic leap, but a steady return. A return to yourself. And in this return, you discover the deepest truth of all. Readiness was never something you were waiting for. It was something you were remembering. And as you live from that remembrance, your life becomes not a question, but an answer, spoken gently, courageously, and fully, one conscious step at a time. You did not arrive here by accident, and you are not listening to these words by chance. Something deeper than logic, deeper than habit, deeper than the restless voice of the world has guided you to this moment. There is a quiet intelligence within you that has always known when it was time to listen, when it was time to remember, when it was time to come home. And as you sit with these words now, I want you to gently consider a possibility that may change the way you see everything. God is not somewhere else. God is not distant, not hidden, not waiting behind a veil you must earn the right to cross. God is the very energy that animates your breath, the awareness that hears these words, the presence that has never left you, not for a single moment. Most of us were taught very early in life to look outward for the sacred. We were taught to search the skies, the temples, the books, the authorities, the experts. We were taught that divinity was separate, elevated, distant, and conditional. And without realizing it, we learned to feel small in the presence of something we believed was great. We learned to bow not in reverence, but in unworthiness. We learned to ask, to plead, to hope that one day we might be deemed enough to be loved, guided, forgiven, or blessed. And in that very learning, we forgot something essential. The source we are seeking is the source from which we came. There is a profound difference between believing in God and knowing God as your own deepest essence. Belief keeps God external. Knowing brings God home. Belief can be debated, defended, argued, and doubted. Knowing is silent. It does not shout. It does not compete. It simply is. When you know that the same intelligence that spins galaxies also beats your heart, you stop asking the world for permission to be whole. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop living as a fragment searching for completion. You begin to remember yourself as an expression of something infinite, temporary in form, but eternal in essence. Think of the ocean for a moment. A wave rises, takes shape, crests, and eventually dissolves back into the sea. The wave may believe it is separate, that it must struggle to survive, that its height determines its value. But the ocean never doubts itself in the wave. The ocean is fully present in every wave, regardless of its size or duration. You are like that wave. Your body has a shape, a story, a beginning, and an ending, but the energy that animates you is oceanic. It is timeless. It does not arrive when you succeed, nor does it leave when you fail. It does not grow when you are praised or shrink when you are criticized. It simply expresses itself as you. The ego, however, has a different agenda. The ego wants you to believe that you are separate, incomplete, and in constant need of validation. It survives by comparison, by judgment, by fear. The ego whispers you are not enough yet, and then points you toward the next achievement, the next possession, the next relationship, the next identity. And the tragedy is not that the ego exists, but that we mistake it for who we are. We confuse the mask with the face, the role with the soul, the costume with the actor, and in that confusion, we forget the energy within us that is already whole. The moment you begin to see the ego for what it is, a learned voice, a conditioned pattern, a collection of thoughts, you create space for something far more powerful to emerge. You begin to notice that behind every thought is awareness. Behind every emotion is presence. Behind every fear is a witnessing consciousness that is not afraid. That witnessing presence is not trying to improve itself. It is not trying to prove itself. It is not trying to become spiritual. It already is what it is seeking. That presence is the quiet place within you that has always been at peace, even when your mind was at war. When you understand that God is not a being who judges you, but the beingness that expresses as you, forgiveness takes on an entirely new meaning. You stop asking, "Am I forgiven?" and begin to ask, "What part of me is still refusing to love?" Forgiveness is not something God grants you after you repent. Forgiveness is what happens when you remember that separation was never real. You cannot hold resentment without believing in division. You cannot carry guilt without believing you have fallen out of grace. But grace is not something you fall into or out of. Grace is the ground of your existence. Every resentment you carry is a story you are telling yourself about how reality should have been different. Every grievance is a contract you keep renewing with the past. And yet, the energy that you call God only exists now. It does not live in yesterday's mistakes or tomorrow's worries. It lives in this breath, this moment, this awareness. When you cling to resentment, you are asking the present moment to pay for the past. And the present moment is innocent. It has done nothing wrong. It simply offers itself to you again and again, asking only that you meet it without armor. Letting go is not weakness. Letting go is alignment. When you release what no longer serves you, you are not losing something valuable. You are making room for what is real. The ego believes that holding on is strength. The soul knows that surrender is power. Surrender does not mean giving up your life. It means giving up the illusion that you are separate from life. It means trusting that the same intelligence that created you knows how to move through you. You were not born to manage the universe. You were born to participate in it. And participation does not require control, it requires presence. When you are present, you are available to guidance. When you are present, intuition speaks more clearly than fear. When you are present, you stop reacting to life and start responding from wisdom. The energy inside you does not shout directions, it nudges, it whispers. It feels like ease. It feels like resonance. It feels like a quiet yes in the body. So many people ask, what is my purpose? As if it were hidden in a distant future or locked behind a series of achievements. But your purpose is not something you find. It is something you remember. Your purpose is to be who you are without apology, without resistance, without the constant need to edit yourself to fit someone else's expectations. A rose does not ask how to be a rose. It does not compare itself to the oak or apologize for not being taller. It simply expresses its rosiness, and in doing so, it fulfills its purpose completely. The energy you call God is creative. It is expansive. It is loving by nature. When you align with it, you naturally become more creative, more expansive, more loving. Not because you are trying to be better, but because you are allowing what you already are to flow unobstructed. Love is not something you generate. Love is something you remove obstacles to. Fear, judgment, and resentment are the obstacles. Awareness, compassion, and presence dissolve them. Healing does not begin when circumstances change. Healing begins when perception changes. You can carry the same wound for decades, not because it is still hurting you, but because you are still identifying with it. The moment you stop saying, this happened to me, and begin saying, this happened and I am still here, something shifts. The moment you see yourself not as a victim of life, but as an expression of life, you reclaim your power. Not power over others, but power within yourself, the power to choose meaning, to choose peace, to choose love. The divine energy within you does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be present. It does not demand that you never feel fear. It invites you to notice fear without becoming it. It does not insist that you always get it right. It gently reminds you that even when you think you have gotten it wrong, you are still held, still guided, still loved. There is nothing you can do to earn that love, and there is nothing you can do to lose it. Love is not a reward. Love is your nature. When you change the way you look at yourself, the way you look at the world changes. When you stop seeing yourself as a problem to be fixed, you stop seeing the world as a battlefield. When you recognize the divine in yourself, you begin to recognize it everywhere. In the eyes of a stranger, in the laughter of a child, in the silence between thoughts. And life becomes less about surviving and more about remembering. This remembering is not dramatic. It does not come with fireworks or proclamations. It often arrives quietly, in moments of stillness, in the simple realization that you are okay right now, that you have always been okay at the deepest level, that beneath the stories, the roles, the fears, and the striving, there is a steady presence that has never been damaged. That presence is not impressed by your achievements, nor is it disappointed by your mistakes. It simply delights in being. As you continue to walk through your life, carrying responsibilities, relationships, dreams, and challenges, remember this: you are not walking alone, and you are not walking toward God. You are walking as God, expressed uniquely, temporarily, beautifully as you. Every step you take in awareness is a prayer. Every act of kindness is an acknowledgement of truth. Every moment of forgiveness is a return to alignment. You do not need to become spiritual. You are spiritual. You do not need to find God. You are immersed in God. You do not need to prove your worth. You are worth itself expressing in human form. And when you live from this knowing, your life becomes less about effort and more about flow, less about fear and more about trust, less about getting somewhere else and more about being fully here. So breathe. Feel the energy that animates you. Notice the awareness that hears these words. Let the seeking soften. Let the striving rest. And allow yourself, perhaps for the first time, to simply be what you have always been, a living expression of the divine, whole, guided, and deeply loved. And as you stay with this awareness, as you allow it to settle, not just in your mind, but in your body, in your breath, in the quiet spaces between thoughts, something subtle yet profound begins to happen. You stop trying so hard to become someone else. You stop measuring your life against an invisible standard that was never meant for you. You begin to sense that the peace you were searching for was never hiding in the future. It was waiting patiently beneath the noise of becoming. Most of the exhaustion people feel is not from doing too much, but from pretending to be something they are not. It is exhausting to carry masks. It is tiring to perform identities. It drains the soul to live from a place of not enough. And when you finally allow yourself to rest in the truth of who you are, there is a gentleness that enters your life, not passivity, not resignation, but a soft strength, a grounded clarity, a feeling that you are finally moving with life instead of against it. The divine energy within you does not rush, it is not anxious, it does not panic about timelines. It understands seasons, it understands unfolding. When a seed is planted, it does not shout at the soil to hurry up. It trusts the process. It trusts the intelligence of life to do what it knows how to do. And you, too, are part of that intelligence. When you stop interfering with fear, when you stop sabotaging yourself with doubt, when you stop demanding certainty before you move, you allow that intelligence to express itself naturally through you. So often, people say they want guidance, but what they really want is reassurance for their fear. True guidance does not always feel comfortable. It feels aligned, and alignment has a quiet certainty to it. It does not scream, it does not argue, it does not beg. It simply feels right, even when the path ahead is unclear. When you learn to trust that feeling, when you learn to honor the subtle knowing in your body, you stop outsourcing your wisdom to the world. This is what it means to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. The outside world is always changing. Opinions shift, circumstances rise and fall, praise turns to criticism, applause fades. But the energy inside you, the awareness that observes all of it, remains untouched. When you anchor yourself there, you gain a kind of stability that no external success can provide and no external loss can take away. There is a reason that moments of stillness feel nourishing. There is a reason silence feels sacred. In stillness, the ego loosens its grip. In silence, the soul speaks, not in words, but in knowing, not in commands, but in clarity. This is why so many people are uncomfortable with quiet. Quiet removes distraction, and without distraction, we are invited to meet ourselves. But once you move through that initial discomfort, once you stop running from your own presence, you discover that what is waiting for you is not judgment, but compassion. Compassion for yourself changes everything. When you stop punishing yourself for being human, you stop needing to punish others for being human too. When you understand that your mistakes were not moral failures, but moments of unconsciousness, you begin to see others the same way. And this is where true forgiveness is born, not from obligation, but from understanding. Forgiveness becomes less about excusing behavior and more about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying it. Holding on to anger does not make you strong. It makes you tired. Carrying resentment does not protect you. It imprisons you. The divine energy within you is expansive, and resentment contracts it. Love flows outward. Fear folds inward. When you choose forgiveness, you are not saying what happened was acceptable. You are saying that your peace matters more than your pain. You are choosing freedom over familiarity. And freedom, real freedom, is an inside job. It is not found in controlling circumstances or people. It is found in mastering perception. When you realize that you always have the power to choose how you relate to what happens, you reclaim your sovereignty. You stop being a victim of life and become a participant in it, not by force, but by awareness. Awareness is the great healer. When you bring awareness to a wound, it begins to soften. When you bring awareness to fear, it loses its grip. When you bring awareness to thought patterns, they no longer run your life unconsciously. Awareness is not something you create. It is what you are. You simply remember to use it. This remembering brings you into the present moment, and the present moment is where life actually happens. Not in regret, not in anticipation, here, now, breathing, listening, being. The mind will try to pull you away into stories of what was or what might be, but every time you return to now, you return to truth. The energy inside you does not live in stories. It lives in presence. Presence does not mean you stop planning or reflecting. It means you no longer lose yourself in time. You use time instead of being used by it. You engage with life without abandoning yourself. And from this place, action becomes inspired rather than reactive. You do what needs to be done, but you do it without inner conflict, without resistance, without self-betrayal. When you live this way, life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a dialogue. You listen and you respond. You trust and you move. You rest and you grow. You stop asking life to prove itself to you, and instead, you begin to prove yourself trustworthy to life. You show up with openness rather than armor. Curiosity rather than judgment. Love rather than fear. And here's the quiet truth that changes everything. The energy you call God has never been disappointed in you. Disappointment is a human projection. Divinity does not keep score. It does not tally sins or track failures. It only knows expression. It only knows expansion. When you act from love, you align with it. When you act from fear, you experience contrast. But even contrast is part of learning, not punishment. There is nothing wrong with you. There never was. There may be conditioning to unlearn, stories to release, habits to soften, but your essence has never been damaged. You are not broken. You are remembering. And remembering takes patience. It takes kindness. It takes willingness. But it does not take force. So be gentle with yourself as you awaken. Do not rush the unfolding. Do not compare your journey to anyone else's. Comparison is the ego's favorite distraction. Your path is unique because your expression is unique, and the divine energy delights in expressing itself through endless variation. You are not meant to copy. You are meant to contribute. As you move forward, carry this knowing lightly but faithfully. You are not alone inside your own life. You are supported by the very force that breathes the stars into existence. Every moment you choose presence over panic, love over fear, truth over ego, you come into greater alignment with that force. And alignment feels like peace, not the absence of challenge, but the absence of inner war. Let this be the place you return to again and again, not as an idea, but as an experience, not as a belief, but as a knowing. God is not somewhere else. God is not waiting for you to become better. God is not withholding love until you get it right. God is the energy inside you, guiding you gently, patiently, faithfully home to yourself. And as this understanding deepens, you may notice something else beginning to dissolve, an old tension you didn't even realize you were carrying. The tension of needing to arrive somewhere else before you are allowed to feel whole. The tension of believing that peace is conditional, that fulfillment is postponed, that joy must be earned through effort or suffering. When that tension loosens, life does not suddenly become perfect, but it becomes honest. And honesty is far more liberating than perfection ever could be. You begin to see that much of what you once chased was not wrong, just misplaced. You were never wrong for wanting love, safety, meaning, or connection. You were only mistaken about where to find them. You looked outward because you forgot inward. You searched in approval because you forgot acceptance. You reached for control because you forgot trust. And forgetting is not a sin, it is part of the human experience. Remembering is simply the return. The divine energy within you is not impressed by how busy you are, how much you produce, or how many roles you juggle. It responds to alignment, not activity. You can spend your life running and still feel empty, or you can stand still in awareness and feel full. Fulfillment does not come from adding more to your life. It comes from removing what blocks you from feeling life fully. One of the greatest blocks is the belief that your value fluctuates, that it rises when you succeed and falls when you fail. But value that fluctuates is not value, it is performance. The truth is simpler and far more radical. Your worth is intrinsic. It is not conferred by success or revoked by mistakes. It is inherent because you exist. And existence itself is the expression of the divine. When you truly grasp this, competition loses its grip. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You stop turning life into a comparison chart. You begin to celebrate others without diminishing yourself. Their light does not threaten yours. In fact, it reflects it. The divine energy does not run out. It multiplies through expression. When one candle lights another, the room grows brighter, not dimmer. This understanding changes how you relate to struggle. Struggle no longer feels like evidence that you are doing something wrong. It becomes a signal that something is asking to be seen differently. Pain is not punishment, it is information. It points to where you are resisting reality, where you are clinging to an identity that no longer fits, where you are trying to control what is meant to flow. Resistance is exhausting because it asks you to fight life itself. Acceptance, on the other hand, does not mean you approve of everything. It means you stop arguing with what is. And when you stop arguing with reality, you free enormous amounts of energy. That energy can then be used to create, to heal, to love, to grow. Acceptance is not the end of change. It is the beginning of intelligent change. The ego fears acceptance because it believes acceptance means surrendering control. And it is right, control does loosen. But what takes its place is not chaos, it is wisdom. The wisdom to know when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to hold on and when to let go. This wisdom does not come from thinking harder, it comes from listening deeper. Listening deeper means learning to trust the quiet voice within you, the one that does not shout over fear but calmly persists beneath it. That voice has always been there. It was there when you were a child, before the world told you who to be. It was there in moments when something felt right even though it didn't make sense. It was there when you ignored it and later wished you hadn't. That voice is not emotional. It is clear. It is steady. It is the divine intelligence expressing itself as intuition. Intuition is not mystical. It is natural. It is what happens when you are aligned with yourself. When you are no longer fragmented by fear, guilt, and obligation, your inner guidance becomes unmistakable. It does not promise ease, but it promises truth. And truth, even when challenging, always brings peace in the long run. Peace does not mean your life becomes quiet on the outside. It means your life becomes quiet on the inside. You may still face deadlines, disagreements, and decisions, but they no longer define you. They pass through awareness instead of consuming it. You handle them with clarity rather than panic, with presence rather than projection. This is what it means to be in the world but not of it, to participate fully without losing yourself, to care deeply without clinging, to love fully without fear of loss. Love rooted in fear says, I need you to complete me. Love rooted in truth says, I am whole and I choose to share. The first binds, the second frees. And freedom is the natural state of the soul. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from illusion. The illusion that you are separate. The illusion that you are alone. The illusion that you must earn the right to exist. When these illusions fall away, life feels lighter, even when it is serious. There is a playfulness that emerges, a curiosity, a willingness to meet life as it is rather than how you think it should be. You begin to notice beauty where you once saw only routine, in ordinary moments, in small kindnesses, in quiet mornings, in the simple act of breathing without needing a reason. Gratitude arises not because everything is perfect, but because everything is alive, and you are alive within it. The energy inside you responds to gratitude because gratitude aligns you with reality rather than resistance. When you are grateful, you are present. When you are present, you are aligned. When you are aligned, you experience flow. Flow is not luck. It is the natural result of being in harmony with what is. And harmony does not require you to suppress emotions. Feel what you feel. Sadness, anger, fear, they are not enemies. They are visitors. Let them come. Let them speak. Let them leave. Do not build a home for them. Do not make an identity out of them. Awareness welcomes without attachment. It allows without identification. This is how healing happens. Not by force, not by denial, but by presence. What you can feel, you can heal. What you resist, persists. When you stop fighting yourself, the energy that was trapped in conflict becomes available for growth. Growth is not about becoming someone better than you are. It is about becoming more fully who you already are. Peeling away what is false. Releasing what is heavy. Trusting what is real. And what is real in you has never been afraid, never been broken, never been lost. As you continue listening, living, and remembering, let this truth settle gently into your awareness. You are not moving toward divinity, you are moving from it. Every step you take in consciousness is divinity expressing itself through form. Every moment you choose love over fear is God knowing itself through you. There is nothing else you need to do to be worthy of this. Nothing to add, nothing to fix, nothing to prove. Simply notice, simply allow, simply be. And in that being, you will find that what you were searching for has been quietly waiting within you all along, steady, patient, eternal, the living energy you call God, breathing as you, seeing as you, loving as you, now and always.